God'll get you for that one.
Maude is owned by Shout Factory.
God'll Get You for That, Walter is produced for entertainment purposes only.
Sponsored in part by Findley's Friendly Appliances. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of God'll Get You for That, Walter.
Which he does not
No, he
today.
doesn't in this episode.
He declines that offer.
But yeah, we still
Not in the cards.
we end up in a cemetery.
Yes, we do.
We do end up in
Mausoleum, actually.
a mausoleum.
A mausoleum.
A mausoleum.
A mausoleum. Not a mausoleum.
Not a...
A mausoleum.
And this is the last episode of God'll Get You for That, Walter.
Yes. Every episode is the last
episode. And this is a podcast where we discuss the 1970s hit sitcom, Maude. I am your host, Tomcat, and I am joined, as always, by my fabulous co-star. Who are you?
Toni Homeperm.
Toni Homeperm, and that's Tony with an I.
Tony with an I.
And today we're going over Season 3, Episode 18. This is our Episode 66.
Mm-hmm.
And this is entitled The Emergence of Vivian. Directed, of course, by Hal Cooper. Written by Norman Lear, Dick Bensfield, and Perry Grant. And we have one guest star who becomes a recurring character, Bert Beasley, who was played by J. Pat O'Malley, who played a number of very famous Disney characters.
Mm-hmm.
He was the Colonel and Jasper in 101 Dalmatians, Colonel Hottie in The Jungle Book, and I think that was all that I can remember off the top of my head. But he was in a lot of 70s movies and sitcoms.
Yes.
So, the episode... Oh, well, first of all, what'd you think of the episode?
Oh, it was cute.
I enjoyed this episode.
It's a cute episode.
Not
Not much to do with Maude.
Not a lot to do with Maude. I mean, it definitely dealt a lot with...
Vivian and Arthur.
It dealt a lot with Vivian and Arthur's relationship and marriage. And of course, Maude being the liberal feminist that she is. There's always going to be that comparison between, Arthur and Vivian being the sort of conservative,
Mm-hmm.
morally driven,
Mm-hmm.
one couple.
Right.
And then you have the very liberal, very forward, progressive thinking Maude and Walter.
Right. Very true.
Even though there are definite times when Walter is very much stuck in his ideals.
Yes.
But I was actually telling Tony before the episode began, I was like, I have something very important to say about this show. Everybody from Maude to Philip could do with some therapy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The only one who didn't need therapy was probably Florida.
Yeah, Florida, I don't think needed therapy at all.
She needed therapy.
She was very put together. But if we said the same thing about her in good times, we would also be saying she too could do with some therapy.
Yes.
So the episode opens with Mrs. Naugatuck sitting on the couch and watching a soap opera.
And she's crying hysterically.
It's a
big mess.
And we overhear, the television saying, "Oh, it was your child all along." Again, typical soap opera
Yeah, one of
fare.
those soap operas.
Did your mother ever watch her stories, or your grandmother ever watch her stories?
My mother did a little bit, but she worked. She was a working mother. She didn't really have the time or patience. My grandmother, though, she was set. It was, and they were her stories.
Yeah,
They were her stories, and it went from, I forget what's the first one in the afternoon, and it went all the way to the end, which was Edge of Night, which came on after General Hospital.
of course.
Edge of Night. That was the last one in the programming. And then, I think the news came on after that.
Yes, the news did come on after that.
Are there any soap operas still left on regular TV?
Not a lot. General Hospital still exists. One Life to Live was canceled. The Bold and the Beautiful is still a thing. All My Children, I think, is still on, I believe. But that was what my mother used to watch. We would, when we were younger, my mother, that was the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
When the kids were born and we were young,
Mm-hmm.
my mother was told to stay at home and take care of the house and take care of the kids.
Mm-hmm.
When we were of age was when she would re-enter the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the agreement that my parents had. But when my mother was home, when we were at home, that was what we would watch. She would watch One Life to Live, Days of Our Lives, General Hospital. I don't know if she watched All My Children or The Bold and the Beautiful. but I being the tiny little queer boy that I was, I was watching it and I'm like, I love Jeannie Francis. I love her. It was Jeannie Francis, wasn't it?
On General Hospital.
On General
yeah,
Hospital.
She was Laura.
Not Laura. I'm who am I thinking of? Oh, God.
Well, Jeannie Francis was Laura on General Hospital. I don't know.
Jeannie Francis was Laura on General Hospital?
Yeah.
I might be thinking of someone entirely different.
I don't know.
Or am I?
I don't know. I remember when I was a kid, I would stay sometimes over at my cousins who lived in Levittown.
Yes.
And there was some soap opera that they were watching. It was I think it was a Channel 2 soap opera. I don't remember which one. And there was this young innocent ingenue who was kind of like the lead.
Yes.
She had this
Jean Cooper.
Jean Cooper. She was like the matriarch.
That was who my favorite character was, I think. On I am nothing if not consistent.
Typical. Well, the young ingenue had the thing for the doctor. Yes. But there was this nurse who worked for the doctor. Of course, she was like the sort of from the bad side of town. Mm-hmm. She was slutty. She wanted to get she wanted to get the doctor. So she engineered this thing where she had to she said that like her apartment there was like a fire or something. She asked if she could just stay in his spare room.
Well, we all know where that led.
No, actually, what happened was, and as we were watching it, and I said to my cousins, I said, "Now watch." I said. The ingenue, she comes over to see the doctor in the morning, and I said, "Now watch." I said, "The nurse, she's going to come out of the shower, and she's just going to be wearing a towel." And sure enough, that's what happened. And my cousins, they look at me and they're like, "You should be writing these."
Some of the storylines from most soap operas were very, very obvious.
Yeah,
you were definitely able to tell. What was going to happen next. Either someone was going to die, someone was going to... And also now with the advent of social media, now that more and more actors are actively on social media, they're telling, oh, well, my contract is up. I don't know if I'm going to renew it. So as soon as you hear that, they're like, oh, well, they're going to kill the character off.
Right. Oh, and this was also a good one on General Hospital.
Yeah.
When they had the whole Luke and Laura thing. There was this one storyline. It was very controversial. Luke and Laura,
they were just like Liz and Dick, on again, off again, on again, off again.
This was like when they were on the run, they were in hiding, and they were working for this woman. I think she owned it was sort of like a saloon or something. I forget exactly. It's so many years ago.
Yeah.
And my grandmother kept saying, "There's something about her I don't like." She said, "I can't put my finger on it, but I don't know what it is." Turned out. She wasn't a woman. She was actually the hitman that was hired to kill Luke and Laura. And like when they actually did the reveal and like she pulled the wig off, it was like my grandma was like, "I knew it."
What was that? There was a movie. I think it was called Soap. Either Soap Dish or Soap Star or some of that effect. It had Whoopi Goldberg and
Sally Field,
Kevin Kline, Robert Downey Jr. Kathy Moriarty played a woman that was on this soap. And again, for the life of me, I cannot remember what the movie was called.
I think it was Soap Dish.
I think it was Soap Dish.
Yeah.
And it's now critically like. When it originally came out, like there were people that were like, "Oh, this is so funny, this is so fabulous, this is so this is so that." Nowadays, when you watch movies like that, it definitely has a sort of negative connotation because it's very transphobic.
Right.
That, along with Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, where they had, oh God, why can't I think of her name now? She was in that one sci-fi movie that was sort of her claim to fame. Her name is escaping me. I have a picture of her on my Facebook. It's me and her. I'm in my Catwoman outfit, and she. You know who I'm talking about? She was on the Joan Rivers show in a Catwoman outfit.
Oh, yes. Yes. Sean Young.
Thank you, Sean Young. Sean Young with Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, another like cringy sort of situation. That also that was another movie that Sean Young did. Was Dr. Jekyll and Miss Hyde. These sort of movies that like really were at the time considered very humorous would definitely be looked at as very cringy these days because they are incredibly transphobic.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So soap operas, Mrs. Naugatuck sitting down crying, and then it cuts to commercial, and the gentleman says for the commercial, "Do you suffer from irregularity?" And Mrs. Naugatuck bursts into tears.
And she's nodding.
She is crying so much, nodding, covering her face, covering her tears. Which I thought was a very funny bit.
It was a funny way to open.
Yeah. So at that point, Maude enters, and she's exhausted.
Right. She's had a bad day.
She's had a very bad day, and she says, "Oh, Mrs. Naugatuck, you don't know how awful a day I've had." And she says, "You think you've had a bad day?" And she goes on to talk about the soap opera. The Wentworth Mansion was looted, and their daughter was ravished, which was a very clean way of saying that she was taken sexually advantage of.
Yes. And this was on The Bold and Bashful.
The Bold and the Bashful.
Yeah.
Which, again, another world. They all had those, The Young and the Restless, General Hospital, One Life to Live,
like
Days of Our Lives.
Before the hourglass.
Like the sands of the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. Oh my goodness gracious! You have to ask yourself where they... And all of these soap operas, they started as radio shows.
Yeah, yeah.
So... After that, Maude is saying how...
she says, TV takes a lot out of you, I think is basically what she said. So she's telling Mrs. Naugatuck about the day she had. She must have showed this couple, 14 houses.
I have written down the 6 o'clock news.
Oh, the 6 o'clock news. I don't remember what they were talking about.
I forget what they were talking about.
I don't remember. But I know she's telling Mrs. Naugatuck
about the 14 houses.
The 14 houses.
And Maude was talking about how the couple was...
They couldn't agree.
They could not agree on anything. Everything the husband liked,
she hated.
The wife hated, and everything the wife liked, the husband detested.
Yes.
And, Mrs. Naugatuck asks, well, what did they decide to do? And Maude says they decided to get a divorce.
And Maude is like, she just wants to lay down.
I want to lay down and have a quiet evening at home. And Mrs. Naugatuck rolls her eyes and says, "A quiet evening in this house? Yeah. Fat chance."
It's not going to happen.
It really isn't.
And of course, it doesn't. Arthur immediately storms
into the house. Just barrels on in like he owns the joint. And he immediately asks, "Something terrible's happened to Vivian. Where is Vivian?"
And I think Maude tells him, well, we can think that's bad, but the Wentworth Mansion was looted and their daughter was ravished. And Arthur's still going on. Where's Vivian?
Well, he says, "I walked into the house, I opened my arms outspread, I got a big kiss from her dog, Chuck. And Maude says, "That dog's got a lot of courage." And so she says she's probably out shopping. Everything is fine. Nothing. And of course, after she says gone out shopping, Arthur's like, "Well, that's impossible. I never gave her allowance."
Didn't give her allowance. So.
Which...
Yeah.
Allowance. This episode really shows how far women have come in terms of being married to men.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, at the bridal shower that I did this past weekend, I was looking at all the girls, and I'm like, aren't men just awful? And they nod in agreement, they applaud, and I'm like, yes, they're tragic. They're only good for one thing.
Thank God.
Oh,
they'd be no use.
They'd be of no use otherwise. Yeah. All we would really need for a good time is a fifth of scotch and a fresh pack of batteries.
Shower massage. So Arthur he makes the bunny rabbit. We start with the bunny rabbit.
He puts his hand in his sock, and his thumb goes through one hole, and his pinky goes through the other, and he shows it to Maude and says, "Maude, look!"
Yeah.
And Maude turns to him and goes, "Oh, Arthur, you made a bunny rabbit."
Yes. Arthur he's annoyed because his sock is undarned.
Yeah, that is an undarned sock.
Have you ever darned a sock?
Nope.
I get a hole in the sock.
They're gone.
That's garbage.
My mother said the same thing. She's like, "Your father has holes in his socks. I just tear them and I throw them out." Yeah. I'm like, same.
Who does that anymore?
People who have the time, the patience, and the presence.
I guess.
I don't.
I know. Also, his dress shirt hasn't been ironed. He needs it for some big meeting for the following day.
And Arthur then says she is not done her appointed
The
chores for the day.
Yeah.
And, Maude comes back at him saying, her appointed chores for the day.
Mm.
Arthur, you're a credit to the 18th century.
Yeah. So Maude says, she suggests maybe she's at the beauty parlor.
Yeah, getting her hair tinted.
Getting her hair, yeah.
And, Arthur's like, Vivian dyes her hair?
Yeah.
So,
So dense.
Maude in true to form fashion says, no, Arthur, the good fairy waves a magic wand over it.
Right. So Maude is insisting there's got to be a logical explanation.
Yes.
Arthur is not hearing it.
Mm-hmm.
He now has to call the police.
And he says, woman unhand me.
Yeah, Maude is trying to stop him.
Yep.
Woman unhand me.
Yep, because he's just that awful.
Yes.
So he calls the police, and, he's like, I'd like to report a missing person. And, of course, at the time during the 70s, the police were just about as useful as tits on a bull.
True.
So they put him on hold, and he says, put me on hold?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a taxpayer, and I demand action.
Right.
And he says, no dumb flatfoot is going to jail. And, of course, he's saying things that would really, really not do him any kind of good.
It was very Karen-like behavior.
Very Karen-like behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So, the person on the other end says, can I have your name, please? And can I have your name and address? Because that, obviously, Arthur is a hostile person at this point, and they want to know who he is.
Well, what happens is Vivian bursts in.
Yeah.
And she's like, I'm home. And that's when the police
ask for his name and address, and he says, John Smith from Cincinnati.
Yes. He hangs up the phone.
And that was a funny bit. Hangs up the phone, and he immediately says, Cubie doll, where were you?
And we find out Vivian spent the day with
Cow.
Cow.
The Congress of Women.
Congress of Women.
And, when she says that, Arthur's like, well, it's certainly named appropriately.
Right.
And, Maude shoots back saying, we had to form Cow to deal with the male counterpart, Bull.
So we find out that Vivian, she had a great time.
She did. She poured coffee. She licked envelopes. She felt vital and alive and useful. Yeah. And she was talking to all these women about politics and, really sort of congregating and networking with these group of women.
Mm-hmm.
And, discussing women's problems. And, of course, Arthur, hearing that, says, what problems do women have?
Yeah, women don't have any problems. And I think that's when he does the bunny rabbit again.
Yes, and Vivian says, oh, he made the bunny rabbit.
The bunny rabbit.
Which, again, adorable. And, at that point, I think he says, what would happen if I would discuss men's problems during an operation? And what does Maude say?
You would save a life.
Which, honestly, was, I love her delivery. I always loved her delivery.
So this starts one of the typical
arguments between
three-way fights or multiple person fights that they usually have in Maude. Each person is yelling over the other person. You can't hear anything.
Hear a word over anybody. And Vivian says, I want to say something, damn it. And this is the first time we hear Vivian swear.
Yes.
Did you ever have a friend, because this happened to me a number of times, people never thought that I swore. People would always say, oh my God, I never heard Tom curse.
Mm-hmm.
I was one of those friends. Did you ever have a friend that was just like the pillar of Christianity and good faith that would never curse?
No.
Yeah, I don't know what ever happened to me.
Yeah.
Because I swear like a sailor these days.
Well, I should hope so.
I mean, when you're surrounded by other members of your family, that the F word is a comma.
Not to mention drag queens.
Oh my God, yes. Mouths like sailors.
Yes.
Anecdotal. My cousin Danielle, whom I absolutely love and adore, is literally my father's clone. Like I say that of my brother and of my sister. No, my cousin is my father's clone. And me and her wife will always say, we know when Danielle has been talking to my father, her uncle, because she will not only sound like him, but she will also swear like him, where it's F this, F that, MFCS.
It's sort of like a synergistic thing.
Oh, incredibly synergistic. And there are times when I will look at her and I'm like, Mario, you're getting too loud, Mario.
Actually, this reminded me very much of, they did this quite a few times in All in the Family. Mm-hmm. Archie would be trying to do something, and he's gonna call somebody, and Edith's like, put the phone down, put the phone down.
Yes.
And then finally she's like, put the phone down, damn it! And like
everybody would just be like,
yeah, including like the audience.
Yes.
And like even Archie would be like shocked.
Aghast.
That Edith like actually used the curse
used
word.
to swear.
And said, damn
Mother
it.
swore.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget the first time I watched the episode when she actually told Archie to stifle.
Uh-huh.
And hearing the audience's reaction and seeing just how proud Gene Stapleton was, like, they were all such fabulous actors. They were so good.
Yes.
They were so good.
So
at that point, you know, Arthur is incensed. Like, damn.
The first time that Vivian has used a 4-letter word.
And he holds his fingers up.
Yeah, 4.
He holds 4 fingers up.
4 fingers.
And, you know, Maude's like, Arthur, 4 is a dirty word.
You know, and Vivian says, well, men can swear. Why can't women?
And, you know, Maude agrees. She's like, come on, Arthur. Vivian has as much right to swear as any other man does.
Mm-hmm. And Arthur he's just like, you know, what happened to like the lovely, gentle, you know, Vivian that I married? He's like, it's like you're turning into another Maude.
And the camera, of course, fires to Maude, and B just has that face on.
Yes.
And, you know, she says, Arthur, do me a favor. He says, what? Go to...
And she
holds up 4 fingers. And, you know, I always thought that Norman Lear probably had the joke be, Arthur, do me a favor. Go yourself.
Right.
And I think they probably had to edit that.
Yeah.
So.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah. So, yeah. That's what I wish the joke was, but it unfortunately is not.
Well, Arthur needed to read between the lines.
Yeah, well, that was my favorite thing that one of my coworkers used to do was she would hold up 3 fingers to my manager and she would say, read between the lines.
Mm-hmm.
Which, you know, adorable.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, Vivian is going on saying that she's not ashamed, and, you know, why shouldn't I go out and enjoy my time with other women? And Maude says, I'll bet he has an answer.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think he at that point, he comes back at her saying, you know, there was really only one woman who would really do for me what I wanted, and that was my Agnes.
His first wife, Agnes.
And my Agnes.
Yes.
There's that possessiveness again.
Right. She wouldn't have
done any of this.
And he's basically says she wouldn't have gone out.
Yep. And Vivian fires back at him saying, the only way Agnes was able to get out was to die.
Yes.
And the audience loses it. Loses it. So, you know, Arthur is, again, incensed.
He's insisting like, Vivian come home right now and take care of him.
You have to darn these socks, and my toes better not be touching leather. So he goes out to leave, and Vivian screams at him, I'll be home when I'm good and ready. And, you know, the audience applause. The audience, like, rousing applause, which, you know, honestly, I was very proud of Vivian in that
Yes,
moment.
for standing up for herself to Arthur, definitely.
Which, again, the Vivian that we were introduced to that was married to Chuck was very independent.
Yeah.
And then this one is so much more independent.
Yeah. And
then there's, you know, this doting, sweet, submissive Vivian.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting how the tide changed for her. So, you know, Maude's like, Vivian, you really are a liberated woman. And Vivian then says, all right, Arthur, I'm going to be on my way home now.
Right.
So Vivian and Maude have this bit.
She's good and ready now.
Yeah, they now
wasn't going home, she was good and ready, and okay, now she's good and ready. Yes.
So, you know, Maude's like, Vivian, if you want to be a liberated woman, you can't hide behind God's skirts.
Right. And she's basically like, you know, I haven't made it all the way yet.
And I pray to God I do. I pray to God I make it all the way through. So at that point, you know...
we cut to the Findleys.
The Harmons.
I'm sorry. The Harmons. We cut to the Harmons' house.
And, you know, Arthur is ironing his shirt. Yes. And Vivian enters, and she's like, I'll help. And, you know, Arthur's like pulling away, being very, very childish.
Yeah, very.
Arthur is being incredibly childish about this entire operation. And I think he accidentally burns his finger. And they have this moment where, have you ever kissed a wound?
From my kids.
I mean, that was really all you were able to do.
Yeah.
It did nothing, but
my mother did it for me when I was a little kid.
Yep. So they're having this moment where Arthur burns his finger, and Vivian's like, "Oh, let me kiss it and make it better." And he goes, "No, there's germs.
Yes,
I'm a doctor, and the last thing I need is a burned finger with germs in it." And at that point, Vivian's like, "I don't give a tinker's ding dong." Obviously, the appropriate word is tinker's damn.
Right.
About his burnt finger.
Right.
And we have this really lovely moment where Vivian is like really trying to open up to Arthur, saying, "I am more than a wife.
Right.
I am a person. I am a human being." And he says, "What's wrong with being my wife?" And we finally understand that Vivian just wants to be independent. And all of the episodes leading up to this, if you don't acknowledge the first season of Maude, Vivian was very doting, very submissive, very subservient to Arthur. And she just wants to be treated as an equal, which any person in a couple would want there to be equality.
Right.
And she just wants to win arguments. And Arthur's like, "Well, you win arguments all the time." And Vivian's like, "No, I don't."
Nope.
And, it's a back and forth until Arthur's like, "No, you always win arguments, and that's the last I want to hear of it." So, again, we're really seeing Arthur for the chauvinistic male pig that he really is.
That he really is.
So at that point, Vivian says, "I just lost another one." And, Arthur then says, "No, I was right. You were wrong. I was merely pointing out the error of your ways."
Right.
And, at that point, he throws the shirt. The shirt was still being ironed. It's now burned.
It's now burned.
So... Arthur is again furious with Vivian, and he says, "This is all your fault. This is woman's work."
And she's not a laundress. She's a person.
Yep. And at that point, we have something that really would not be shown in today's world. Arthur physically grabs Vivian and starts shaking her, which by today's standards would technically be considered domestic assault.
Yes.
And he's like, "Vivian, you're my wife. This is what you're supposed to do." But here's where things get a little gray.
Yeah.
While Arthur is shaking Vivian, Vivian is smiling and getting turned on.
Yes.
Which only speaks to the amount of therapy that Vivian would need.
Yeah. Arthur's saying that he brings home the bacon.
Yup. And, while Arthur is continuing to shake her, Vivian is continuing to become awakened, as it were.
Yes.
So at that point, Arthur finishes shaking her, and, Vivian has this moment where she's like, "Arthur, I've seen a side of you I've never seen before."
Right.
And she's like, "Would you mind shaking me again?"
Shake me a bit more.
Arthur shakes her again, and then Vivian immediately reaches around his neck and pulls him in for a very deep kiss.
Yes.
And Arthur is, again, just, really taken aback. Conrad's eyes go wide.
Yep.
And, he pulls away, and he's like, "Vivian,
what are you doing?
What are you doing?" And, Vivian's being very, very sexual, saying,
Yeah.
"Well, the dog's asleep."
Dog's asleep.
And she looks at him and says, "Woof, woof." Which, not since Mae West did we really see a woman initiate sex in such a way.
Right.
And again, I think that was one of the reasons why I'm No Angel, which was, I think, one of the only two movies where she really initiated sex. Because I think the last line of I'm No Angel was, she said to Cary Grant says to her, "What are you thinking about?" And Mae says to Cary, "The same thing you are." And then they kiss, and then it fades to black. So, I mean, I really am happy the way more women characters are written these days, because they are written more sexually advantageous, where they will initiate intercourse and they will, be more independent, as it were. And, compared to compared to Maude, like it really, this is one of the reasons why Maude was such a groundbreaking show.
Yeah.
Because it showed a more independent female cast.
Right.
Despite the, chagrin of the male counterparts.
Yeah.
So, Vivian and Arthur are embraced, and, Vivian is like, I always hated when she did that. But it was just her way of, that was her mating call. So Arthur is insisting that she mend the shirt.
He says it's not a woman's prerogative to do that.
Yes, he does say that.
Yeah.
And that he says, Vivian's like, I just want some equality.
Right.
And so Arthur's like, you really want to feel the way I do when I'm in the mood. And, Vivian agrees.
Yeah.
And Arthur says, take a cold shower.
Take a cold shower.
Which I don't think it works the same way.
No.
It does not work. The vagina and the penis do not work in that fashion.
No.
Taking a cold shower works great for a guy, not so much for a woman.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it does.
Maybe it does.
But Vivian's like, oh, together.
Yes.
She's like, let's take a shower together.
And, at that point, I think Arthur pulls away and he says, no, you mend this shirt. And Vivian takes the shirt, throws it over his head and pulls him in again and says, fine, after.
Right.
So I think at that point, Arthur, pulls away for the last time. And he says, I'm going to the cemetery.
No, he says, you're not the woman I married.
Oh, that's right. You're not the woman I married. You've gone from a sex kitten into a tomcat.
Isn't that strange? Who would have guessed?
I didn't.
Who would have guessed? From sex kitten to tomcat.
Well, stranger things. I'm both, honestly.
Maybe that should be your autobiography.
Sex kitten into a tomcat. That is the title of my autobiography.
So he's saying he needs to get out.
Yes.
And that's when I think Vivian's saying, oh, you're not going to the cemetery to talk to Agnes again.
Yes.
But that's probably where he's going.
That's exactly where he's going.
And that's when we go to break.
Yep.
Excuse me.
You okay? The allergies are killing him.
It's my allergies. It's the allergies. As long as I suck on these Ricolas, I'm okay.
We are not sponsored by Ricola.
Not sponsored in the slightest, but...
So, it's funny that we say cut to commercial, and then there's a Ricola
And then there's a Ricola.
Oh, well, yes. That is a thing.
Better than one of those Mentos commercials, right? Remember those stupid Mentos commercials?
They made a comeback on TikTok.
Oh, they did?
They did. Mentos the Fresh Maker. So I don't know who started the trend, but some people have been taking the Mentos commercial and putting it over really, really, really awful scenes from cinema. And I'm talking about the one scene where Macaulay Culkin's character dies from the bee stings. There was that one. There was, oh God, I think there was the other scene where it was that movie with the volcano, where the guy saves the people, jumps in the lava, and helps people along.
I don't remember that.
But again, just putting the Mentos the Fresh Maker over these really traumatic scenes from certain movies.
I have to find those.
I don't know who started it, but it was a thing on TikTok.
There you go.
So... people just do the craziest things.
All right. So now we're back to the Findleys.
We cut back to the Findleys, and the doorbell is ringing like crazy.
It's nighttime. It's the living room.
Yep.
Lights are out. Doorbell is ringing.
Yep.
So, of course, what do we hear?
We hear Maude and Walter arguing.
Walter arguing, coming down the stairs.
Yep. And I think Walter says to Maude, why don't you go answer it? And Maude says, why don't you go answer it? And then... I think Walter says something to the effect of, fine, I'll go open the door. After all, you're the woman. And, of course, Maude is furious.
Right.
I'm the woman, Walter?
Right.
And Walter's like, I had to say that.
Yeah.
So, I think at that point, there was an argument over women's liberation again. And, I think at that point, Walter says, fine, I'll open the door.
Right.
And he holds up finger guns.
Yes.
He has one finger gun.
pistol.
He says, who is it? I got a gun. And, Vivian says, it's Vivian.
Vivian.
So I think Walter opens the door, and Vivian comes in this beautiful... She was in a very beautiful... all of Vivian's outfit was very attractive. Her hair was very beautifully done. Because she had obviously come from the hairdressers. Or,
Right.
no, she was with Cal, but the joke was that she had gotten her hair done.
Yes.
So she enters, she's crying, she says, Maude, my marriage is falling apart.
Yes.
And Maude, puts her arm around her and says, oh, Vivian, that's what marriage is all about.
Yeah. She tells Walter to put away his pistol.
Yeah, you know how much I hate guns.
Yeah.
So I think at that point, Walter says, ours falls apart every night of the week.
Right, right. So Maude wants Vivian to tell her, what's going on.
And Vivian says that, Arthur went to the cemetery to talk to Agnes.
Right.
And that apparently for the last couple of weeks, I think Vivian says that he's gone back and forth to talk to her.
Mm-hmm.
And, Maude quips saying that, well, that's...
And he's been there for at least 6 hours at this point.
At least 6 hours. And Maude quips saying that's the longest he's ever talked to her since she was alive.
Right. Oh...
So, I think at this point, Vivian says to Maude, Arthur shook me, and he shook me.
And she saw another side to him.
Yep. And he saw another side to her.
Yes.
And, she was in the mood for funsies.
Yes.
As she called it.
She said it awakened me.
It awakened, exactly. She says
Yes.
it awakened me. And,
Yes.
Maude says, don't call it funsies, call it what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And Walter shoots back. In our house, we call it whoopee.
Whoopee. And I think Maude tells Walter to go sit in the corner.
Yes.
And I think he offers to get Vivian a drink.
Yes, which he does. He goes to the bar and gets a bottle of bourbon.
Mm-hmm. And Vivian is now lamenting. She's saying, my marriage is going down the drain.
I should have stayed the old dutiful,
Vivian.
Submissive Vivian.
Right.
And, Maude's like, bite your tongue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, Maude and Vivian have this sort of back and forth argument where Maude's like, don't you understand that in order to be a liberated woman, you have to, promote yourself and you have to put yourself out there in a more aggressive way. And
she
Vivian
tells her
shoots back,
survival is at stake.
Yes.
Her survival is at
stake.
As a human being.
And then Vivian comes back, don't you understand that I'm going to lose my marriage over this? And they're both arguing, and then Mrs. Naugatuck comes downstairs saying, doesn't anybody understand I'm trying to get some sleep?
I need me beauty rest. Now she's got curlers in her hair.
Curlers in her hair.
And that neck thing.
What? I've seen that on a number of people. What does that do? Is it just to prevent grinding your teeth?
No, I think that they thought it would prevent double chin.
Oh my God.
I think that's what they thought.
Sure, if that helps them sleep at night, go off.
Yes.
So at that point, Maude says to Mrs. Naugatuck, we'll try and keep our voices down. Sleep tight, Mrs. Naugatuck. And what does Mrs. Naugatuck do?
She's like, sleep tight, I think I will. And she grabs
the bottle of bourbon
and
goes upstairs.
Because tight in UK slang means to be drunk.
Yes. It means the same thing these days. I would obviously not use tight as an adjective to describe.
I don't think most people today would get it.
They wouldn't.
I don't think they would get it. But I digress.
So I think at this point,
Vivian she's still going on. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should have darned his socks.
Yep. And at this point, it's Vivian in the middle, Maude on the left, and Walter on the right. And Walter and Maude are going at it. Walter's saying some women like to be dominated. Maude's like, women just want equality. That's what they want. Mm-hmm. And, Maude's like, see how happy we are. Mm-hmm. And Walter's like, I don't care how happy we are. Bleh.
Vivian tells them to both shut up.
And, they're both arguing, and then, Vivian holds her hands up to cover Maude and Walter's mouth. And she says, I'm going to have to do this on my own, figure it out on my own, in my own way.
She says, nobody's going to help me except me.
Yep. And at that point, the audience applauds. They clap for her. Maude turns to her and says, now you really are a liberated woman.
She tells her, Baby, you've come a long,
Yep,
long
you've come
way.
a long way, baby.
Like those cigarettes, was it the Virginia Slims?
Yep. I've had those once or twice.
Have you?
I have. I also used to smoke Mystics and Capris.
Never smoked, so. It was never my thing.
The only reason I did it was because I only did it because I got stressed from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you lived in the house that I did, you too would be stressed. But I digress.
But we digress. We digress.
I don't smoke anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny. In terms of becoming addicted to nicotine, and in terms of becoming addicted to something, I think the only thing I'm really addicted to is sugar.
Mm.
Like
I could see that in myself.
I love sugar so much. Chocolate, pastries, desserts, all that fun stuff.
Actually, for me, it might be more carbs than sugar.
I mean, but are carbs addicting?
Absolutely.
No, they are.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting that I can kick one habit, but I can't kick the other one.
I know. Well, that's the thing I've always said. Something like an addiction to food or cigarettes, not food, to cigarettes, to drugs, to alcohol. Those things, you can cut, I mean, it's possible to cut those out of your life, completely avoid them. Mm-hmm. How do you cut food out of your life when you have a food addiction?
It's very difficult.
That's very difficult. That's very difficult.
I was talking to one of my friends recently, and he had said to me, "Oh, I went to Weight Watchers, and I didn't like the number on the scale." And I was like, "Do you mind if I advise you on something?" Mm-hmm. And he goes, "Sure." And I'm like, "Try and lower your sugar intake. Because sugar promotes eating more sugar, right, which will only add to the fat in your system.
Gives you that insulin rush.
Yes. Yeah. It gives you immediate gratification, immediate satisfaction, and the only problem is it goes immediately to all of the areas in your body that contain fat. Now, I am not a doctor, but I know that lowering sugar intake promotes a faster working metabolism.
Right.
And you also have more energy if you're like focusing more on proteins and focusing more on things that promote energy.
Right.
Sugar only provides so much energy. And the problem with a lot of produced foods today is there is so many preservatives. So much sugar. So much sugar in these things. I remember reading that if you get a caramel frappuccino with extra caramel in it, that's like eating, I think, 12 sugar donuts or drinking like 3 bottles of soda.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, that's insane.
Yeah.
That's absolute madness.
It is.
Yeah.
The American diet is way too much sugar.
Way too much sugar.
Too much sugar, too much fat.
Just too much.
Yeah.
Too much. And if you go to any other country, their portions are very different. The way that they produce food is very different from the way that they produce food here.
The kitchens are so much different.
The kitchens are different.
Refrigerators are so much smaller. Because they eat a lot more fresh things.
Yeah.
So they
don't need to pile on pile on preservatives or anything.
So they're not filling the stuff with things that have preservatives that can sit there, for a great length of time.
Yeah.
They're buying things, that are fresh.
Yes.
Especially like in Italy, a lot of the people there, it's like every day is like there's a trip to the local fresh market.
Yeah.
What's fresh today? What am I gonna?
What are we making for dinner? What are we making for
What are we cooking?
And also, it's a question of portion control.
Oh God, yeah.
And that was the other thing I said to him, because I adore this person to absolute bits and pieces. But there are times when he'll buy these giant Snapple bottles and he'll finish them in a day.
That's the worst thing for you.
And I'm like,
yeah, that's the worst.
There's nothing but sugar in that. Yeah. It is a little bit of water, and the rest is just sugar.
Yeah, that should just be,
And I also look at, the energy drinks, like Gatorade, Powerade.
Yeah, they're not really good for you either.
They're not really great for you either. They're loaded with sodium and sugar.
The best thing for you to drink is water. And most people aren't drinking enough water.
Yeah. So. But I mean, look, there are a lot of things that say, oh, well, you're supposed to drink 8 glasses of water a day. You're supposed to do this much a day. And it's like, how much water do you really need to drink a day in order to... And then I think about all of the water that we as entertainers and costumed individuals sweat out.
Yeah.
That you need to put back into your body.
It's true. Very true.
So
there you go.
it's very interesting. Just be careful and watch what you eat.
Mm-hmm. So Vivian has decided she's going to go and confront Arthur at the cemetery.
And before she leaves, she says to Maude, is this too much bazoom for a cemetery?
Right.
And Maude says, Go, Vivian, go. So at that point, we cut to the cemetery, and it shows...
It's actually a mausoleum.
It's a mausoleum, yes.
It's a mausoleum, because it's like an inside... Well, it's like a crypt.
Yeah.
It's a mausoleum. It's inside.
It's inside. It's not outdoors. Because honestly, I think it would have been cheaper to have a set than to try and show like grass. And
yeah.
I just think it would have been cheaper to do it that way and not the other way.
And they have like the the people are entombed in the wall kind of thing, and and there we see the one square that says
Agnes Harmond, 1927 to 1966.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny because this episode aired in 75. So at that point, she'd been gone almost 10 years.
Right.
So at this point, we are introduced to Bert Beasley, who is the groundskeeper of the cemetery.
Groundskeeper, I guess, / security guard.
Yep, groundskeeper, security guard of the cemetery. What a grim job.
Mm-hmm.
But yes. So Bert comes in and he has, this sort of plummy attitude, and he has a very, very thick accent. I don't know what accent it is. I think he's got a bit of an Irish / Scottish accent. No, I think it's Irish.
Is it?
Bit of an Irish brogue.
And
he says to Arthur, I thought I heard breathing.
Yes.
So, Arthur is obviously being very pensive, and he's talking to Bert as if Bert is an old friend, and obviously Bert is an old friend if Arthur's been coming to see Agnes
for 10
time,
years.
10
yeah.
years.
And Arthur's saying I'm having trouble with the wife.
And there's a laugh. Bert's got this very...
He's like looking at Agnes's tombstone thing.
And, Arthur's like, oh, not Agnes, my new wife Vivian. And I have written down that Bert says sooner or later we all end up here.
Right.
And, Arthur's like, what do you think about this women's lib? And Bert's like, it's a tidal wave.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like trying to stop a burp after eating a radish.
Yeah.
The more you try to stop it, the louder it gets. Which gets a couple of laughs from the audience.
Yes. And that's when we hear knocking.
Yes. And Bert says, "Now I hope it's someone trying to get in and not out."
Not out.
So at that point, Vivian comes in, and again, she is bereft with grief, and she's trying to reason with Arthur.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, Arthur's like, I used to come here to think. I used to come here after Agnes died. Right. Now I just come here to think.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little morbid, but you go to a place that's quiet and serene, and you just sit with your thoughts for a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's when you start hearing the voices that you have to say to yourself, I think I need to get out of here.
Yeah, definitely.
But in all actuality, I dated someone that used to go to cemeteries just to be pensive and to be in thought, because it's very quiet.
I should hope.
It's very quiet. It's very serene. Sure, it's a little morbid, but it's nice to just go somewhere and not be bombarded by things that would make you feel overwhelmed.
Yes. Well, I don't. As I'm discovering, I don't need to go to the cemetery to rediscover the deceased. They're coming to me now.
They're coming to you in your sleep.
Yeah.
They're visiting.
Yeah. Just my luck.
I've been there.
Just my luck.
I've been there.
So Arthur's saying he never had these problems with Agnes.
Yes.
And Vivian is saying she's not Agnes. She doesn't want to be Agnes.
And she doesn't want to be Maude either.
And she doesn't want to be Maude. But she's other things
Yes.
besides being a wife.
Yep.
You know, there's more to, Vivian Harmon, and she's saying, about stuff
There's
she
more to
did in
Vivian
her past.
Cavender. She was the captain of the girls' soccer team.
Right.
She was class
Valedictorian.
valedictorian.
Right. Yeah, she's a
She's
person.
so much more than just a wife.
Right.
And at this point, Vivian starts shaking
Arthur. Yeah.
And she says, I am more than just a wife. I am a person. I am a human being, and I want to live my own life. Can you get that through your thick head?
Right.
And she releases Arthur, and she doesn't release Arthur because she continues shaking him until Arthur finally embraces Vivian, and they start kissing.
Right.
Which again only speaks to how much therapy Arthur would need.
Yes. So they're in this really long
embrace,
and
Bert comes back saying you'll have to leave if you're not in mourning.
You're not in mourning.
And Vivian laughs and says, "He's in mourning already."
Mm-hmm. And who called who lamb chop?
I think Arthur called Vivian lamb chop.
Lamb chop.
And I think Vivian says, "Don't tell me the way to a man's mind is through his sex drive."
Mm.
And I think they have a moment where I forget what Arthur says, but I know that Vivian then comes back saying, "I feel like this is the first time in our relationship that we're equals."
Mm-hmm.
And Arthur says to her, "Let's go home and really shake each other."
Yes.
So Arthur goes to leave, and Vivian puts her hands to her head to make antlers.
Right.
And she sticks out her tongue at Agnes.
At Agnes. Yes.
Which I think was appropriate for Vivian to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was inappropriate.
Yes. This whole time in the marriage, she's kind of...
I'm trying to think about who would have been cast for Agnes. Who could you have seen as Agnes Harmon?
Somebody like Mrs. Cleaver.
Yeah.
I
was Mrs. Cleaver definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to think of actresses of the time.
Donna Reed.
Yes, Donna Reed.
Would definitely be like an Agnes type.
Dinah Shore.
Mm-hmm.
Again, very sweet, innocent, pure. Sandra Dee, I think, also comes to mind, but that's much older. But it's interesting because we hear about Agnes a number of times throughout the series, especially when Arthur wants to sort of needle Vivian.
Yeah. It would have been fun if they maybe did a little bit of a flashback.
Yeah.
And show
a flashback between Arthur
and Agnes.
And I think there was another thing that Arthur mentioned where, Agnes never raised her voice to me, even when I was stepping on her oxygen.
Right.
Just again, one of those things where, Arthur was really a dreadful husband.
Oh,
to
yeah.
her.
Yeah.
So, again, it's interesting to see the dynamic between Arthur and Vivian, the way Arthur used to work with Agnes, the way Maude remembers Agnes.
Mm-hmm.
But we never really get much of a backstory on her other than to just be a plot point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was kind of like she was just the perfect, domestic goddess.
The perfect domestic goddess.
Right?
But Arthur ignored her, treated her very unkindly, gave her an allowance, did basically everything he's trying to do to Vivian. But Vivian is far more liberated. And I do believe that Maude has definitely been some type of influence to her.
Definitely. But that wasn't the relationship Vivian had with Chuck.
No. The relationship that Vivian had with Chuck was very
modern.
Very modern.
It was very modern. I mean, their whole thing with, them getting a divorce was
because they hated each other.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I'm like, was Chuck really that bad compared to Arthur?
Gotta wonder.
But there's actually an episode, I think in season 5, either 5 or season 4, where Chuck comes back. For one episode. It's the same actor, but with a beard and with less hair on his head. And not only is Vivian attracted to Chuck, but so is Maude.
Oh.
And it becomes one of those Vivian versus Maude episodes.
Okay, another one where Who was the other one guy that they both had the
hots for?
But he was he was like a con man.
He was a con artist.
I can't remember.
Oh my God!
And she got the postcard.
Yep.
And all
Peter
that.
Durland.
Yes,
Peter Durland.
Yes.
Peter Durland. That was an interesting episode.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was only that other episode where it was Chuck. But Chuck was also attracted to Maude.
Mm-hmm.
There was also another episode. It wasn't it wasn't like a Maude versus Vivian situation.
Mm-hmm.
It was when Arthur's twin brother is released from a mental institution.
Oh, I don't remember that one.
Yeah, it was. I forget the name of the episode, but Arthur. I forget the brother. I actually forget the brother's name. I only saw the episode recently. It was in season 5. But it was also the twin brother was played by Conrad Bain's actual twin brother.
Oh, I didn't know he had a real twin.
Yep, he had a real twin brother. And he's only shown at the end of the episode.
Okay,
but because Conrad plays both brothers until the end of the episode where the twin is actually brought out.
Gotcha.
And I think his name is Arthur Bain.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm not 100% on that one. But that was an episode where that character was playing to Vivian and also playing to Maude.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was very flirtatious and sexual with Vivian, and he was also trying to be flirtatious and sexual with Maude.
Oh.
It was a very interesting episode.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll get to that later.
We will. Sometimes I feel like when they do look-alike characters, they're kind of like they're sort of jumping the shark at that point.
Yeah,
you know?
It definitely sort of felt that way. Also, hilariously enough, so to those who don't know, Tubi does have Maude. We were initially saying like 2 weeks ago that seasons 3 and 4 are available on Tubi. They are no longer available on Tubi, but seasons 5 and 6 are.
Yes.
Now, it's interesting because season 5 felt like the end of Maude.
Mm-hmm.
And then you watch season 6 and they are polarizingly different.
Mm.
They really are. Like, I remember watching season 5 all the way through and I'm like, okay, that last episode of Maude really felt like the end. And then you watch season 6 and it's really like watching a different show.
Mm.
Philip's been recast.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Naugatuck is no longer there. We now have Victoria Butterfield.
Mm-hmm.
And the episodes are a lot more cartoony, but they still do that sort of interesting juxtaposition between, liberal and conservative, Republican and Democrat, man and woman. And there's a lot more bite from Maude. I think Norman I think at that point it was also a different director. I think the director was Charlie Hawke, or I'm trying to remember when the shift was from Hal Cooper to a different director, because I don't think Hal Cooper was the director for the entire run of the show.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting to see the differentiation between both of those seasons.
Right.
But we'll obviously get to that eventually.
We will get to it. We'll definitely get there.
So, we thank you so much for listening to another episode of God Will Get You for That, Walter.
We apologize for the coughing.
We apologize for the coughing.
It is the allergies are just horrendous.
Allergies and heat.
Allergies,
all the
heat. It's like
menopause,
womenopause,
and
then all gender fluidopause.
Yeah,
I don't know.
They're all there.
Yes.
And if you would like to hear us more, you can on YouTube at God Will Get You for That, Walter, on Facebook at God Will Get You for That, Walter, and on Instagram you can find us at Findley's Friendly Appliances.
Yes.
If you would like, you can follow me at That Tomcat on all forms of social media. That is Cat with 2 T's. Where can they find you?
Oh, Toni Homeperm, and it's Tony with an I, and that's Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok.
Same.
So there we go.
It's just my name is That Tomcat, and yours is Toni Homeperm.
That's right. From sex kitten to Tomcat.
From sex kitten to Tomcat. When I
a
first
woman's
saw
emergence.
A woman's emergence. A woman's emergence.
I get a percentage now of the royalties of of the autobiography.
And it's funny when I watched this episode a couple of weeks ago, I was like, "There's going to come a time when we have to do this episode," and I am positive Tony is going to point out the obvious remark.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, that was again when I was younger. It was Top Cat, Tomcat. That was the joke. And then as I got older and I discovered myself, I was like, oh, well, this makes sense now to just call myself Tomcat. The name has been with me for years. And it wasn't until I actually looked up the definition where I was like, a sexually active male cat. Well, if Vivian can be a Tomcat, then so can I.
So can you. Absolutely. Go out and shake someone today.
Oh, we thank you so much for listening, and you will hear us on another episode of God Will Get You for That, Walter. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.